They came at 3 a.m. pretending to be HOA officers, but inspection wasn't their mission. It was invasion. Their uniforms, badges, even their official tone, all part of a carefully planned lie meant to turn our trust into fear. But they picked the wrong house. Inside was my mom, Rachel Lewis, a Navy SEAL veteran who didn't wait for permission to protect her home. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Our family lived what many call the American dream. Our house stood in a neat cul-de-sac just outside Austin, Texas. The neighborhood had trimmed hedges, double-car garages, and friendly neighbors who waved while walking their golden retrievers. It was the kind of place where people left bikes in front yards overnight and only locked doors out of habit. But my mom didn't trust appearances. A retired Navy SEAL with 22 years of active duty, she had seen too much of the world to ever relax completely. She might have traded body armor for sundresses and lawn chairs, but old habits didn't retire with her. She still checked every lock twice. Still sat facing the entrance in restaurants. Still kept a flashlight and a tactical pen within arm's reach. She didn't talk about what she'd done overseas, not to the neighbors, not even to me. But she carried it with her. Not like a burden, more like a second skin. I often teased her, "Come on, Mom. This isn't a war zone." I'd laugh, pointing to our backyard garden or the hummingbird feeder. She would just give me that small, quiet look, the one that said, "It only has to feel like one once." On the night of March 14th, everything seemed ordinary. The sprinklers had clicked on at exactly 2 a.m. The neighborhood, still and warm, was wrapped in its usual blanket of silence. I had fallen asleep with my earbuds in, half watching some late-night video. Mom, as always, was only partly asleep. She lay in bed, eyes closed but alert, the kind of rest soldiers learn to master, just enough to recover, never deep enough to miss the sound of trouble. At 3:03 a.m. her eyes opened. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't shouting. It was something quieter, more deliberate. A metallic clink, like a latch being tampered with, followed by low voices, not panicked, calm, coordinated, almost rehearsed. Then nothing, a stretch of perfect, heavy silence. Mom slipped out of bed without a word, no panic, no noise, just practiced precision, as if her body moved before her brain had finished processing what she'd heard. She walked past the family photos in the hallway, past the guest room, and paused briefly at my closed door. I was sleeping soundly. She didn't wake me. Instead, she opened the hallway cabinet and reached for the item she hoped she'd never need again. A locked, padded case. Inside it, a tool not for intimidation but for control. A measure of last resort for moments when reason disappears. She moved toward the front of the house, lights off, steps slow, breathing steady. Outside, on the other side of the front door, two shadows stood just out of reach of the porch light. One of them raised something. Maybe a clipboard. Maybe not. Then came a voice. Firm, official sounding. Open up. HOA compliance check. Mandatory inspection. Mom didn't answer. She didn't move. She just waited because something wasn't right. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't normal, and Rachel Lewis had survived too much to mistake calm words for good intentions. Open up. HOA compliance unit. The shout rang through the door like a judge's gavel, sharp and out of place in the stillness of the night. The pounding that followed was heavy, deliberate, not a polite knock but a demand for obedience. My eyes flew open. At first I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or if the sound had come from inside my headphones, but then I heard it again. Another thud, louder this time. I sat up, heart racing, mind foggy with confusion. Mom was already moving. She'd opened the hallway safe with the same efficiency she'd once used to clear buildings overseas. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Inside was the Benelli M4, a smooth, reliable tool built for clarity in chaos. The peephole offered a narrow slice of the front porch. Two figures stood under the motion-activated light, dressed in matching black vests with reflective letters, HOA enforcement. It was meant to look official. Clean fonts, tactical gear, badges hanging from lanyards. But Mom saw what most wouldn't, the inconsistencies, the positioning of the patches, the lack of agency insignia, the way one of the men kept shifting from foot to foot, glancing at the driveway like he was checking for something or someone. Mom's grip tightened, her instincts fine-tuned from years in volatile places, whispered the truth before logic caught up. These men were not who they claimed to be. She turned silently toward the kitchen where I now stood, barefoot in the hallway, pale and wide-eyed. Mom raised a single finger to her lips, then pointed toward the pantry. I obeyed without a word. Back at the door, Mom took position just out of the line of sight. She kept the shotgun angled low, not out of uncertainty but control. She listened. The voices returned. They're stalling. Just breach it. 3 seconds, then we go. 1, 2. The lock splintered. The door swung open fast, not kicked but forced with practiced pressure. The first man stepped inside, scanning the room as if expecting to find frightened residents and no resistance. He didn't expect Mom. In a single smooth motion, she raised the shotgun and gave a loud, firm command, "Not another step." But the man reached, whether for a tool or something else, Mom couldn't risk waiting to find out. The sound that followed was sudden and final, not drawn out, not chaotic. One precise report that echoed through the walls like a warning to the second man still outside. He bolted. Mom didn't pursue. She secured the area, keeping her eyes on the hallway, listening for any movement. The house, once filled with quiet tension, now rang with the sharp beat of adrenaline. I peeked from the pantry door, my voice just above a whisper, "Mom, what just happened?" She exhaled slowly, checking the chamber and lowering the weapon. "Stay there. Call the police." Her voice was calm, steady. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear couldn't lead. Not now. Through the open door, the porch light flickered in the wind. The illusion of safety had been shattered, but not the resolve of the woman standing in its place. The blast had knocked the first intruder off his feet. He crumpled near the doorway with a thud that sent a tremor through the floorboards. Later we'd learn his name was Derek Reed. Early 30s, no priors but a long digital trail of bad intentions. The second man, Mark Jensen, had chosen flight over fight. He stumbled backward, lost his footing in the flower bed Mom had planted last spring, and disappeared into the dark, crashing through the side gate like a startled animal. But Mom didn't follow. She wasn't thinking about glory or revenge or what the man might do next. She was thinking about angles, about exposure, about me. The front door stood wide open, the cool night air washing in like a warning. Mom stepped forward, nudged it shut with one hand and twisted the lock, then the second, then slid the deadbolt into place, mechanically, deliberately, like sealing off a breach. She turned and moved through the house with the same methodical rhythm, checking windows, sight lines, listening for anything out of place. It was quiet now, too quiet for what had just happened. When she found me in the hallway, I was standing perfectly still. My arms hung by my sides, my face pale. The pantry door was still half open behind me. Mom didn't speak. She just looked at me. Really looked, to make sure there was no harm, no bruises, no blood, only the wide, stunned eyes of someone who had just come face to face with a truth they weren't ready for. I was shaking. Not violently, just enough that you could see it in my fingers. I didn't know what to do, I whispered. "You did exactly what you needed to," Mom said calmly. "You stayed quiet. You stayed safe." Her voice was level as always, but something in it trembled underneath, not from fear but the weight of what had nearly been. She walked past me toward the kitchen phone, the one wired into the wall, the one that didn't rely on batteries or signals or chance. She dialed 911 with steady fingers and reported the incident with the precision of a woman giving a field update. 2 armed intruders, one incapacitated, one fled, one occupant armed, shots fired, no injuries among residents, address is. She gave it all in under 20 seconds. When she hung up, she leaned on the counter for just a moment, just long enough to feel the reality catch up to her. Then she turned back toward me. I hadn't moved. I was still staring, not at the door or the hallway or even the body outside. I was staring at my mother. Rachel Lewis, the woman who made pancakes on Sundays, who fixed the leaky faucet, who always made sure the tires were rotated on time, the woman who seemed most days like any other mom in the neighborhood. But in that moment I saw something else. Not a mother, not a neighbor, not even a woman. I saw a presence, a force trained to respond when others freeze, a protector who had come out of retirement in the space of a single breath. It was terrifying and it was safe. For the first time in my life, I truly understood the distance between the woman my mother chose to be and the warrior she had once been trained to become. And tonight that warrior had saved our lives. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the entire block within minutes. Sirens broke the fragile silence that had followed the encounter. By the time the first cruiser skidded to a stop at the curb, Mom had already disarmed, unloaded her weapon, and placed it on the kitchen counter. It was visible, unthreatening, part of the scene now. Still, the moment officers entered the house, everything moved fast and loud. Hands where we can see them. Step back from the weapon. Get on your knees now. I watched from the hallway, frozen again, but this time not by fear of criminals but by something colder, more impersonal. They treated Mom like a suspect, as if she were the threat. She didn't argue, didn't flinch, just slowly raised her hands, voice steady. "I'm the homeowner. The intruders are outside. One is wounded. The other ran. Check their IDs. Check their truck. You'll see what they came here to do. But no one was listening yet. Protocol ruled the moment. One officer secured the scene. Another read writes. Metal cuffs clicked into place. Mom didn't resist. She simply looked me in the eye as she was led out the front door and nodded once. It was enough to keep me grounded. Outside, the situation began to shift. As the perimeter was searched, officers found the second man's truck parked a few houses down, hidden halfway behind a tree. Inside, they discovered a large black duffel bag. No clothes, no personal items, just equipment, a flashlight, two-way radios, rolls of tape, pre-printed HOA-style warning slips, a binder of false documentation, inspection forms, fake fines, even signatures forged from real board members. And beneath all that, zip ties and gloves. It wasn't a work kit. It was a plan. A few feet away, Derek Reed was sitting against the curb, wounded but conscious, under close supervision. He didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Mark Jensen, the one who had fled, didn't make it far. A K-9 unit found him 2 blocks over, hiding behind a restaurant dumpster. He was cold, disoriented, and visibly shaken. A few light scrapes on his face. His hands were still gloved. He offered no resistance. Back at our house, things finally began to slow. One of the senior officers reviewed the preliminary findings and called for the cuffs to be removed. Another apologized to Mom, not effusively, just enough to acknowledge what had begun as a mistake. Mom nodded once. No resentment, no outrage. She understood. This was how the system worked. It reacted to circumstances, not stories. It couldn't afford to assume someone was a protector. Not until the facts aligned. Mom wasn't angry. But I was. I watched the way my mother stood in the driveway. Not humiliated, not defeated, just distant. As if she was already mentally writing a report, already back in a world where people didn't ask questions first. They cleared rooms and debriefed later. To the neighbors who had gathered, it was a strange, surreal moment. But for Rachel Lewis, it was just another perimeter, another gray area where doing the right thing meant waiting to be proven right. And in my eyes, it was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Because I had just learned something systems couldn't teach. Courage doesn't wait for permission. It acts, then takes the consequences head-on. Over the next 24 hours, the illusion shattered piece by piece. It started with a phone call from a detective to Mom, now officially cleared of suspicion. Then came the reports, the database matches, the grainy security footage from neighboring counties. Mark Jensen and Derek Reed weren't just pretending. They had built an operation methodical, convincing, and increasingly bold. 4 weeks, they had posed as HOA compliance officers, complete with badges, clipboards, and branded vests. Their script was simple. Show up late in the evening under the pretense of enforcing minor violations. Overgrown grass, garbage bins left out, broken fences, just enough authority to sound plausible, just enough fear to keep homeowners compliant. And it worked. Using this routine, they had talked their way past front doors. Sometimes they asked to inspect the backyard. Other times they demanded access to verify fencing boundaries. They moved quickly, grabbed what they could: electronics, jewelry, documents, always targeting houses that looked well off, quiet, unsuspecting. In 2 cases, according to police reports, residents had been forced to remain in a room while the duo ransacked the property. The tools found in their vehicle, gloves, tape, zip ties, weren't accidental. They had done this before more than once. The most disturbing part came from Arizona. 2 months earlier, a similar pair fitting their exact description had entered a home under the guise of community enforcement. The homeowner, an older man with heart issues, panicked during the confrontation and collapsed. He was later pronounced dead at the scene. The suspects had fled. No arrests were ever made in that case until now. Mom's instincts hadn't just protected our family. She had stopped a pattern, one that was escalating. When local law enforcement confirmed the link, the story broke. News vans lined the end of our street by noon. Neighbors watched from their porches as reporters gave live updates in front of our home. Headlines ran across Texas: veteran foils home invasion disguised as HOA inspection. Fake officials, real danger. Retired SEAL stops criminal duo. Talk radio lit up with calls praising Mom's courage. On social media, she was dubbed everything from the last line of defense to the HOA they should fear. But Mom didn't read the articles. She didn't care about likes, shares, or airtime. She stood on the back deck that evening, staring out into the yard. The fence was still broken where Mark had run through it. The flower bed was trampled. Her shotgun rested inside, cleaned and locked away again. For her, the headlines weren't the victory. The victory was that I was safe, that our home still stood, that evil had knocked and been turned away. The rest was just noise. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't the peaceful hum of appliances and distant sprinklers. It was a kind of stillness that settled in after the storm, heavy and waiting, like the walls were listening now, like they remembered. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at an open textbook I wasn't reading. The pages might as well have been blank. I tried to focus, to be normal, but the scenes kept playing on repeat. The pounding at the door, the command, the sound, my mother's face. That face haunted me the most. Not angry, not panicked, just focused, locked in, cold in a way I had never seen. I wasn't sure if it scared me more than the men who broke in. Mom hadn't spoken much since the incident. She wasn't one for long conversations to begin with, but now even her silences felt heavier, more calculated. She moved through the house like someone measuring every step, every line of sight, every vulnerability. One night, when we were both in the kitchen, me fidgeting with my glass of water, Mom checking the locks again, I finally spoke. "I still hear it," I said quietly. Mom didn't ask what. She already knew. "You don't wait for evil to knock politely," she replied. "You stop it at the threshold." There was no bravado in her voice, no pride. It was a simple truth, said by a woman who had learned it the hard way and carried it like armor. I nodded, but it didn't bring the comfort I thought it would, because knowing we were safe didn't erase how close we came to not being. And suddenly the world outside, the one with mailboxes and trimmed lawns, felt less like a neighborhood and more like a place where things could go wrong at any moment. Even stepping outside felt different now. I used to wave to the neighbors. Now I watched them longer, tried to read more into their faces, listened to the way people walked down the sidewalk. I noticed cars more, watched the patterns of headlights. Mom noticed too. She didn't just check the doors anymore. She stood by the window longer, silent, observing, not paranoid, just vigilant, like the threat wasn't gone, like she didn't believe it ever would be. She was watching the street, yes, but mostly she was watching me. It was strange realizing the woman who made cookies on weekends and fixed the garage door was also the woman who could end a threat in seconds. The contrast made everything else feel thinner. The walls, the locks, the daylight. Our home had survived the break-in. But now it had to survive the weight of what came after. And that, I was learning, might be even harder. Mom wasn't charged. The decision came after days of review, interviews, forensics, and quiet debates behind polished conference tables. The district attorney's office took their time, carefully, deliberately, not because they doubted the threat but because situations like this always raised questions. Legal ones, ethical ones, public ones. Was the use of force justified? Was it too fast, too final? In the end, Texas law spoke clearly. The state's castle doctrine allowed homeowners to defend themselves and their families with no obligation to retreat when faced with an immediate threat, especially one that broke down their door in the middle of the night. Mom had done exactly what the law allowed. But legality and peace of mind were two very different things. Back at home, Mom didn't celebrate. She didn't mention the ruling. She simply returned to her routines, cutting the lawn, tightening the porch light, checking the security cameras twice a day. To the outside world, it might have seemed like she had moved on, but I saw it differently. There was a new kind of quiet around my mother now, not silence. Mom had always been a woman of few words. This was something else, a stillness, as if she were carrying something invisible that didn't quite let go. One evening after dinner we sat on the back porch. The sun was dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Mom held her coffee like she always did, both hands, steady grip, even when it was nearly empty. I hesitated before asking, "Do you think it'll ever feel normal again?" Mom looked out across the yard for a moment before answering. "No," she said, "but normal is not the point." She paused, then turned slightly, her voice quiet but clear. "I didn't want to shoot, but I had to. And I'd do it again." There was no pride in the words, no regret either, just truth. Simple, weighty, unmoved by emotion. Mom had done harder things in war zones, more dangerous, more chaotic. But those were missions. This was different. This was her own front yard, her own floorboards, her child sleeping down the hall. She wasn't haunted by what she did. She was haunted by how close it came to not being enough. For me, hearing those words settled something, not because they answered all my questions but because they showed that even people trained to act without hesitation still carry the cost of their choices. And in that moment I realized something important. Being right didn't always feel good, but sometimes it was the only thing that kept you alive. Weeks passed. The house still looked the same from the outside. Same siding, same porch swing, same garden bed that had started to bloom again. But inside the neighborhood, something unspoken had shifted. Security cameras appeared almost overnight. Not just at our house but all along the block. Doorbell systems, motion sensors, dusk to dawn floodlights. Where once there had been trust, now there was surveillance. Neighbors waved less, or if they did, it was brief. A nod, a glance, a quick word before retreating indoors. The tone of casual conversation had disappeared. Block parties were quietly canceled. The next HOA meeting didn't happen and no one asked why. Mom walked the same sidewalk she always had, but now with a different kind of space around her. People moved slightly aside, unsure whether what they felt was respect or fear. Maybe both. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was a reminder. I noticed it most. Not just the neighborhood but my mom. Before, she had always been steady, quiet, dependable. The woman who changed oil herself and reminded me to mow in straight lines. A veteran, yes, but in the way people said it, with a past tense comfort. Now I saw her differently. Not as a soldier but as a shield. I realized something I hadn't known to look for before, that the calm in our home had always had a cost. That peace had a protector. And while the world hadn't changed, my understanding of it had. It wasn't just the break-in that did it. It was what came after. The way Mom sat facing the door now. The way she scanned the street before locking up at night. The way she never seemed surprised by anything anymore, only prepared. One afternoon, Mom invited me out to the range. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me thought it might be some kind of training, drills, tactics, a mother turning a child into a version of herself. But it wasn't like that. Mom showed me how to breathe first, how to stand, how to wait, how to be still. There were no lectures, no war stories, just quiet repetitions and short corrections. It wasn't about weapons. It was about presence. After a long silence as we packed up to leave, Mom said, "You don't have to be a soldier, but you do need to know how to protect what matters." The words weren't heavy. They were offered gently, like advice passed down instead of pushed forward. And I understood, this wasn't about preparing for a fight. It was about carrying the weight of responsibility, not in fear but in quiet readiness, about not letting the world make you paranoid but also not letting it catch you unaware again. As we drove home, the sun dipped behind the houses, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac. The neighborhood was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now, the kind that had been earned. The sentencing didn't take long. Mark Jensen and Derek Reed pled guilty on all counts: impersonation, forced entry, organized burglary. The evidence was overwhelming. No appeals, no second chances. Each received 20 years, no parole. The judge called it a cowardly and calculated abuse of trust. Mom didn't go to court. That morning, while the legal system closed the case, she sat on our front porch, coffee in hand, staring out over the same street where it had all begun. I joined her in silence, unsure whether this day was meant to feel like an ending or just another morning. After a while I asked, "You okay with how it ended?" Mom didn't smile, but her face softened. "No one wins in these things," she said. "You just survive them and make sure the people you love do too." The porch creaked beneath us as the breeze stirred the hedges. Across the street, a motion light flicked on. But this time neither of us moved. We weren't afraid anymore. We were aware. We were watchful. We were ready.